In this new podcast, we're talking to young people from all over the world who moved to the Netherlands and Belgium, whether by choice, chance, or necessity, and who are trying to build a new home here. Our guest today is Pablo. Pablo's from Mexico, but he moved to the UK when he was a young boy, and he moved to the Netherlands when he was just 20 years old. Welcome, Pablo.
Thank you for having me.
So, tell me, in your own words, how did you end up in the Netherlands?
Right, so like you mentioned, I was born in Mexico City and I lived there for roughly about 7 years with both my parents, who were also born there, and my brother, an older brother. And we decided to move to London in 2007, roughly. My dad got a job out here in London, so it was a nice time for him to move. And I think at that moment we stayed there for about 13 years. So I went to school there, primary, secondary, sixth form, and at the age of 20, so it was roughly around 2020, I decided to move to the Netherlands, and yeah, I built my life around here for the last 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So it was March 2020.
Yeah, March 2020.
COVID was just... The pandemic was kind of in its early stages, and you thought this is a good time to move to the country.
Yeah, I think for me, when I moved was just to do the lockdown. I was very lucky because my parents actually lived here for a bit just before I did, so I wanted to just do the lockdown with them. However, doing the lockdown here, it kind of made me in a weird way, love Amsterdam, just seeing it in a different perspective, and not see it how it usually is a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I fell in love with Amsterdam just by walking through the streets and the parks when it was when the bars and the cinemas and everything was closed. So it was a different experience, but a really unique and beautiful experience, I think. Yeah.
And now, 4 years later, how has Amsterdam changed compared to your first impression?
4 years later, it's changed quite a bit now. I think I still have the same love that I had at the beginning, especially more because I've learned more about the culture, about what the Dutch like, what they don't like. And I think I've became more Dutch in the sense that now that I'm on my bike and a tourist walks past and I get annoyed at them, I feel more Dutch, and I think.
And you ring the bell aggressively.
Yeah, or I call them a pancake, or that's when I felt like I became more of a Dutch person. But some perspective has changed within the last 4 years, but I think I still have a big love to the Dutch culture and the Dutch people. So yeah, it's been a nice 4 years here so far.
Nice. Yeah. And why did you decide you wanted to leave the UK in the first place? Because you probably already built quite a long time, like building a home in the UK. What was the reason that you were like, okay, I'm actually ready to leave again? Yeah,
that was a very hard decision, but for me I also studied government and politics during sixth form, so I was quite young, and that was the whole period of Brexit happening. So for me, I was just thinking, since I was, 17, 18 years old, where I wanted to be a little bit later in life. And for me, once the UK fully declared Brexit and fully decided not to be within the EU, I decided that I wanted to be still in the EU. I wanted to hold a passport that was easily transferable within the EU. So for me, that was my main decision of leaving the UK. I didn't necessarily think the Netherlands. However, after living here in lockdown, that's when I decided, okay, Netherlands is for me. Especially because when we were able to walk around the streets, obviously everything was closed, but you can walk to the park or anything. I saw the beauty of Amsterdam, and I realized why I wanted to stay within the EU and leave the UK. So that was the main idea for me.
Interesting. And so you got here March 2020. What was your first impression? I mean, it was probably very different from how you experience Dutch culture now, because the bars were closed, no one was sitting on terraces, no one was cycling around the streets. How was that first impression for you?
It was very interesting because at first, I didn't see the real Amsterdam, the real Netherlands life, which again, like you mentioned, the bikes and the terraces. However, there was some key stuff that I noticed that were a bit different. I mean, first of all, my first impressions were it's still beautiful. I love the fact that they conserved the historical look of the beautiful buildings and old buildings in the city, and it's not really as in, for example, in the UK, in London, where everything's gentrified now, all the new skyscrapers, all this new modern living, it's all in the center, or it's all in the places that I used to grow up. But here, you go to Dubai, you go to Jordan, it's all the same, it's beautiful, and you keep all those modern buildings a little bit outside of the actual city center. So for me, that was my first impression. I thought, amazing, I loved it.
It's interesting you say that, because I moved to the Netherlands 10 years ago, and I've seen the city change quite a lot in that time. So you'll probably, if you stay here for longer, you'll probably see that as well. Like, the first impression you get of Amsterdam, you know, very picturesque, very, very old. And I think that's true. Like, we definitely have all these areas where it looks like picture book. Yeah. And then there's so many new buildings popping up everywhere where I never expected that to happen. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because like you said, for me, it's something that I haven't really grown up with. I mean, in 4 years, nothing like as much would change as, like you said, in 10 years. But like going back to London now and the areas I grew up in, I think most of the places are torn down and now are big apartments. Yeah. For example, I grew up in Lewisham, and there's a library there and a shopping center, and now it's being shut down for building. So for me, that's
seeing like this cityscape change.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
London. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how you'll experience that in Amsterdam.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Because also when I moved here, I heard but I didn't know about was looking at the open curtains. So walking around the street when it was empty and still seeing that aspect where the Dutch people, they leave the blinds open. That was also nice to see that one thing that they said that was going to happen, I did actually see. So that was also interesting.
So you also, like me, walk around just looking curiously into everyone's living rooms.
In the living room to see, oh, wow, like, would I put a shelf there? I don't know, you know.
That was also quite a culture shock for me, because in Germany, curtains are closed. No one lets you look inside. And here, no one cares.
Yeah, no. There's a nice aspect to it. I mean, of course, it's like a nice trust within the community. But yeah, for me, growing up in Mexico and London, this would never happen. Blinds are closed, and unless you're at home, or maybe you open it for a little bit of sunshine. But it's nothing you would do like here. Yeah.
Were there any other things that really shocked you about Dutch culture, or where you really were surprised and that you really didn't expect?
Yeah, I think mostly how, I don't know, I was recently speaking about this, the birthday celebrations they do. Because in Mexico, for example, whereas you do your birthday celebration, you always do it with family, and like you have drinks and you invite everyone, friends, family, but it's like in your house and it's open, and like you walk around, have a few drinks. Whereas here, I've noticed maybe it's a little bit more old-fashioned now, but it's, you go around in a circle and you have the ham and the cheese in the middle.
King Verjaardag.
Yeah. And then you have to say gefeliciteerd to every single person, and like for your person.
What's with that? Like everyone just congratulates each other for like
for someone else's birthday. Yeah. So we're like, well, yeah, go say it to them. You know, it's not my birthday. So that's also kind of a nice. It was a big culture change for me to see that, and also something. This is more because in Mexico, obviously, they don't speak as much English, or in England, they don't speak any other, mostly they don't speak another language. It was interesting to come here and straight away everyone was bilingual, something I never really experienced. So that was a really nice change of perspective for me.
Yeah, because when you moved here, you obviously didn't speak any Dutch, no?
No, I didn't know any Dutch at all. And at first, I mean, I don't really like to claim it, but I was like an English person, and I said, well, if they speak English, I don't really have to learn the language. But then I realized, oh, wait, actually, I even had to learn English to become part of a different culture. So I decided to start studying. So I went to lessons and took different courses. And especially when I decided to fully integrate myself here and want to become a Dutch citizen, I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to do the Dutch passport, which means I would have to learn the language. So for me, it was really nice, and it was really interesting to learn a language that it's not spoken that much in different places, but it was really good. I like.
How's that experience for you learning Dutch?
It's a weird concept because it's very similar to English. For example, when you say little keywords like water and water, there's little similarities, but then the structure is completely different to English. But then that structure is kind of similar to Spanish structure. So when I was learning it, sometimes I think I made it harder for myself because I would try to think in both Spanish and English to translate a sentence or a structure, but it made me confused even more. And it was sometimes phrases where I just didn't even make sense in either language, like nagedacht, gedacht. Like I never know when to use certain words or certain phrases. So, but luckily, my Dutch friends were really nice and really welcoming, and they were actually able to they would reply to me. And if they really didn't understand something, they were like, "Yeah, you just have to kind of know it,"
Yeah. So did you experience hesitation from Dutch people when you're when you're now trying to speak Dutch? I hear from quite a lot of people that they really want to learn Dutch, and then everyone just speaks English so well that it just becomes really difficult to practice.
Yeah, I definitely did see that, especially at the beginning of learning Dutch. I don't know, trying to order something in a restaurant, and my pronunciation wasn't quite there. For example, like saying mag, and then it didn't come out well. They was straight away switched to English, and I guess I understand because they're efficient people and they want to get to the point and go straight forward. However, I found a little loophole. I would like to say that it's because when I heard my Dutch friends speaking with each other, sometimes if they couldn't get a phrase out, they would start the phrase in Dutch, then they would switch slightly to English, and then they would go back to Dutch straight away. So I tried it. I would start a conversation in Dutch. If I didn't know the word, I would say in English, and then switch to Dutch again. And they would mostly reply to me in Dutch, which was a big change for me. It's oh, wow, before, if I didn't know the word, they would go straight to English.
Yeah.
And
so perseverance, really trying to convince them that you really want to learn it. Yeah.
So I think it's just even if they don't want to speak Dutch, you straight away, just mark your confidence in your Dutch. And I think they're actually more welcoming because it's also for them better to speak Dutch because they want to, speak their language. Of course, it's their country. But then I also understand, which most of them try to say, is they also want to practice their English. But their English is always really, really good. Especially, I don't know if you've noticed when they say, sorry, my English is not that good. And then they say the best phrase that I don't even understand in English. And I'm like, wow, your English is better than mine, So I've had those situations, which I always find funny when they say, my English is not that good.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because you moved here in March 2020. Yeah. Everything was shut down. Did you know a lot of people here? How was that experience for you moving here and trying to build a new social life?
Yeah, it was definitely very tough. So I didn't know any single person here in the Netherlands. So it was really tough because even my friends didn't know anyone from here. So I couldn't really say if your friend lives here, let them know I'm here, and maybe we can get a beer or something. It was more okay, I had to think how I could do it was, or how I did it really was that I played quite a lot of rugby when I was growing up in London. So what I did was I looked for a team, and I found a team, Amsterdam Cobras, and they're a rugby league team, really good team. And I messaged them straight away, and they said to me, hey, come down, we'll sort you out here. And that's how I started meeting people. So I met a lot of Dutch people actually in that team. So, and a lot of international players, mostly Irish. And I've actually became really close friends with them. And then they introduced me to their friends. For example, one of my friends, James, I met there. He's from Ireland, and he had been living here a little bit longer. So he introduced me to his friends. So it's kind of how I got started. And then I started working in the Horeca in restaurants. And then I started meeting more Dutch people. And from then on, I kind of just built a base where a friend would be at a bar and they said, come over. And then they introduced me to a friend. And I've kind of, it's just that. I just picked a hobby that I really liked. And that was a sociable one, like rugby. And from then I just built a good friendships. And yeah, it was really interesting how I built it here. And I really enjoy my life and my friends that I have here.
Yeah. Do you feel like does it feel a bit like an accomplishment? How does it, because starting with no friends and then, well, no friends here in the Netherlands at least, and then now having a group of friends.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that transition?
Yeah, definitely. It helped me quite a lot, especially when I first got my first Dutch friend. I was really happy about that because I've heard obviously...
That one first Dutch friend?
Yeah, I was
You're
like, yes, got him. Because obviously I've heard like how Dutch people don't really like to bring people into their group, and especially internationals.
Do you feel like, was that an experience you had? Like,
yes, in a sense, because of course I didn't try to like force my way into a group of Dutch people. I kind of wanted to play it naturally, but I did see and I heard a lot of stories from friends where it did in fact like they had a good Dutch friend, but they either chilled just them two or they wouldn't chill like the groups together, you know. And when I first met my friend Bram, I met him through rugby actually, and he was a really nice, very open-minded Dutch person. So it was really nice. He introduced me to his girlfriend, and then he introduced me to his friends. And I think at one point I was at a barbecue where it was only Dutch people, and I think that was my first like accomplishment. I was like, oh yeah, like I'm with Dutch people now, and it was funny to see like just how acceptance they were. And I mean, it was a young group, you know, 20s, 30s. So it was a young group, but it was still nice to let them be open and to have me in. And they're obviously very curious about me, where I was from. You know, they obviously love Mexico. So it was a really nice experience. And that was, like you said, a big accomplishment for me was like having a Dutch friend and having the Dutch friend invite me to a Dutch event. It was really fun. But funny enough, obviously growing up in London, most of my friends were either, well, all of them were English born, but they have different backgrounds. So Nigerian or Jamaican were mostly the backgrounds of my friends, Turkish as well. So I never really had any Latin friends in London. I'd have the odd one or two, but most of them were different backgrounds, which was really nice. But then coming here, funnily enough, I met so many more Mexicans, and most of my friend groups here actually speak Spanish, and it's just a whole different perspective of how I grew up with my friends only speaking English to now majority speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
So that was also quite a nice experience for me, speaking Spanish all the time now.
Yeah. How does language impact the way you feel like comfortable in a situation or you feel settled in? Because you spoke Spanish also with your parents, I think.
Yeah.
And then obviously you learned English while living in the UK. Now you're learning Dutch. Do you feel like there's a difference in confidence, but maybe also in just feeling comfortable? Depending
definitely.
which language you speak with people?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, for example, the confidence elements to it. I think it's vital because, for example, in Spanish, I feel I'm so much more comfortable because of the jokes. It's a silly thing, but the jokes that we make, especially in Mexican Spanish, for me are so much funnier than any jokes I say in English or any jokes I hear in Dutch, you know, like 10 times funnier for me. And that's when I feel a little bit more confident. And I'll say English will be more my comfort zone because most of the memes or most of the jokes are always going to be in English.
You just said speaking in your home language. Interesting, because what would you say is your home language?
Yeah, I've always think about this because, again, that's mostly a big question that people ask me, or which language do I speak in, or think in, sorry.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say home language for me is going to be Spanish.
Yeah. That's where you feel most yourself as well?
Yeah, I would say maybe not the most myself because when I was growing up in London, I learned a lot of new stuff about myself and like sports I liked and things that I really enjoyed doing, and that was mostly in the UK. But I don't know, when I specifically listening to music, I listen to more in Spanish because it makes me feel more like who I am. So it really varies for me. But the only thing I would say with the Dutch right now, I'm not at a level that I'm comfortable to even think in Dutch, you know, or to maybe even start a conversation about anything like politics or about the world in Dutch, I would never feel that comfortable at this moment within 4 years. But
yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Give it some time.
Exactly.
Nice. I'm interested because you said music is quite a big part, like plays quite a big part of your identity, or at least your Mexican identity, maybe. Are there any other things where you're like, oh, this is so Mexican to me, and I really want to treasure it? Or are there things about maybe British culture where you say this is something I want to keep close to me? Or maybe you say, actually, this part about Dutch culture I love, and I really want to make that kind of my own.
Yeah, I would say I think the Dutch people have a really nice culture within their social life and their friends. I think like if you ever tell your friends, oh, let's go for a beer, like, just for a chat, I think they will always be down for just to get together, especially in the winter times. You know, it's like so dark, it's so cold. You don't want to be at home by yourself, so you're like, okay, I'm gonna go meet up with friends. And I think that's a big thing in Mexico, where it's a very social culture. So it's a lot of being with friends and being with family. And I think that's a big thing here, whereas like if you meet any Dutch people and you try to go out with them, they're actually booked for like months in advance because they're seeing friends or they're seeing family. So I think that's a big culture similarity that we both have.
The socializing and the wanting to get together for a drink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just being there for your friends. I also think that within the English culture in London, even though they're a little bit more reserved and a little bit more close without like meeting new people, I would say once you have your group, it's a very solid group and they stay for a while. For example, I'm still friends with my friends that I went to primary school with or secondary school with. So we were 10 years old and we still have that friendship. So I think the people from the UK and London, they hold on to their friendships quite strong, which I think is beautiful, and it shows a lot of character. So yeah,
nice.
I like it.
Yeah. You've now lived here for almost 4 years. Yeah. Would you say you feel at home here now?
It's a good question. I would say I'm not fully at the point where I'd say this is my home. I think it's getting to that point. Of course, with now my built friendships and the relationships I built here have been so nice that I've got to one point where I think, oh, if I left Amsterdam, I'll feel sad of leaving my friends and the life that I built here. So I'm getting to a point where I think it is going to be my home. However, at this moment, I wouldn't say it's necessarily my home. Maybe just because it seems like a long time, but it's still a bit short period of time, because compared to in the UK, I lived there for 13 years. Here I've only lived for 4 years. Mexico 7. So for me, I would say I need to give it a little bit more time to actually declare like this is my home, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe even once I become fluent in Dutch, then I can say, oh, this is my home, you know?
For me, that was a big part in feeling at home. I think learning the language, because when you move somewhere and you don't know what people are talking about around you, that makes you feel a bit excluded. And I think for me personally, a big part of feeling at home is to feel part of the community.
Yeah, exactly.
But it seems like you're on the way.
Yeah.
You're pretty good on the way. Getting
a
big group of friends, Dutch and international friends.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. Cool.
Yeah, I try to. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's mostly the language that's the barrier that's stopping me to say, this is my home. But maybe when I turn 10 years here, I'll do it.
Because, for example, say you're talking to a friend and you say you're traveling to London next weekend. Would you say, oh, I'm going home next weekend?
No, I'll definitely say London. Yeah, I wouldn't say home.
And if you're in London and you say, oh, I'm going to Amsterdam next weekend, would you say I'm going home next weekend?
I'll probably say I am going home just because this is where I see you and this is where I've been living. So I would say home, but I don't think there will be any like sentimental attachment to it. It's just because where I'm based. But for example, I was in the UK last weekend and they would ask me, oh, are you heading back home now? And for me, I hope they meant Amsterdam and not Mexico, but yeah, no, I was like, yeah, I'm going home now. So for me, I guess I would say it's home just where I'm staying, but at the moment, there's not that big attachment to it, of the sentimental value of it. Yeah.
Did you feel at home when you were in London?
Yeah, for a while, I definitely thought I was home. I'd say not in the early stages. I remember in the early stages, I even told my parents, like, oh, if people want to speak to me, they have to learn Spanish. That wasn't the case. I had to learn English. But I think it's more my teenage year where I've kind of found what I liked, playing rugby, having that group, that social group, and I felt more at home, knowing how to move around London easily, knowing everything there was what made me feel like I was at home.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go back now, I don't know how to move as easily. Everything's quite new. I don't know the areas anymore. Especially, for example, last weekend, when I was there, we went to this area, Peckham, which is now being gentrified. But before, it was the area that I would necessarily not go to. But now we were just having coffee and I think it was arepas, and we're just there.
Probably in like some sort of like backyard.
Yeah.
That sells sourdough bread.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a very weird concept to me. So that's why necessarily I wouldn't say London is home now, just because maybe I don't know my way around anymore, and I've lost that London touch, really. Yeah.
What would you say, kind of looking forward, what does your ideal home look like? When do you know you'll be home somewhere?
I think I'll be home where, again, I feel comfortable with the language, fluent, I hope. And I think, like I mentioned already, being able to move around your city, or your town, or wherever you live, that's how you know you're home, because you know how to move around, you know what to wear, you know everything around your area. I think that's what makes it kind of home for you as well. But yeah, moving forward, looking forward to it. I would also want maybe a home for me would be somewhere with a bit more sun. And I think that's just the Mexican in me. Of course, I kind of grew in with it, the same weather in the UK that it is here. But I think I've always pictured myself ending and making myself a home where somewhere's a little bit more sun. But you never know. I mean, I love Amsterdam. I love the Netherlands. So
Do you see yourself going back to Mexico?
I wouldn't see myself going back to Mexico, no. I definitely want to stay in Europe. But I think the thing I love about the Netherlands is that it's very accessible to different places. So I can go to the UK to see my friends, or I can go to Madrid where my parents live. So building a home for me here in Amsterdam would be ideal. And like I said, with the groups I've built here and the relationships I've built here, I would more than happy call it home, because I do love the Netherlands quite a lot. Yeah, so I would call it home here soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
I notice you have quite a lot of tattoos.
Yeah.
Are they completely random, or do they relate to your different cultural backgrounds?
No, yeah, they definitely. I think when I first had the idea of getting a tattoo, I wanted to definitely represent where I was from, because my main idea was, when I was in London, I didn't know any Mexicans or any Latino people. So for me, it was very, I don't know, felt quite sad that I was there by myself. So
Did you feel like you missed the connection?
yeah, exactly. Just seeing, like, not being with my friends, and knowing that my friends were growing up in Mexico, and I was just kind of feeling a little bit detached from who I was and where my home, or where I came from. So I decided to mostly focus my tattoos on the Mexican culture. However, as I grew up, I kind of progressed more the idea of being in places where I love, where I find home. For example, like, I have a tattoo here where it says London with a rugby ball, because London was obviously where I grew up, and rugby was something that I did when I was there and I fell in love with. And I think it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in London, fell in love with that rugby and the rugby culture.
So London and rugby are very connected for you.
Yeah, that's like the biggest thing that I remember from the UK. Whereas I have the Aztecs and the Mayans, and one of my favorite ones, Day of the Dead. This is a very important day for us.
For Mexican culture.
Exactly, giving color to death. That is not always sad, but it's actually a very beautiful thing where we remember the people that we've lost. And and this little one here means made in Mexico. So if you actually grab like a good bottle of tequila or a Mexican product, you would always see this symbol there because it says Hecho en Mexico, which is made in Mexico. So I definitely wanted to have pieces of Mexico and London to represent where I was from and the value that it had for me, because it was big things in my life that happened. So for me, yeah, that's why I kind of focus more the tattoos on that.
So you're carrying your identities
exactly
with you.
Yeah, exactly. And always remember where I'm from, London and Mexico.